what is the difference between what we've seen from Justin Fields over the last 2 years at Ohio State, where he lose the game in the Big Ten, versus what we're hearing now. And even with mock draft, having him as the 5th quarterback selected, I think we're seeing some people look at what happened with Dwayne Haskins, the failure that he was in the NFL, and assigning that to Justin Fields instead of like this. These are very different players, very different prospects. So I think that is one key right now, and hopefully that's why John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are taking that trip to Columbus, Ohio. It's not just to get some frequent flyer miles, it's to actually see, hey, is there something to Justin Fields that we have missed? Is there something here that maybe we've fallen a little too quickly for Mac Jones? So the hope would be that they're still evaluating this thing, because I think Justin Fields is a fantastic player. He's my number 2 quarterback in this draft. Why people are overlooking him, I think that's one of the hardest questions to answer right now in terms of NFL circles, because everyone's asking the same question. Everyone I talk to says the same thing. Why is everyone overlooking him? Hopefully they're not, and maybe we're just all a little late on realizing who falls in love with him.
Jeff, Darlington, what do you hear from people around the league about Justin Fields and the potential for him to fall this way?
Yeah, I would say that if we're all asking why we're overlooking him, it probably means that we're not overlooking him. And that's always the curious thing to me. What will happen on the day of the draft? Every year, and this is not to totally knock the mock draft system, but every year we do have guys that fluctuate before and after the draft. It's ultimately what team falls in love with Justin Fields, and that is what we are about to find out. It's the reason, to your point, about why the 49ers are going to go to this pro day. All it takes is one team. Every year, if one team decides Justin Fields is their guy, they'll be willing to do what it takes to draft him at the appropriate spot.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out again, what we're talking about here is him being drafted something like 8th or 11th. And we're not talking about him slipping into the second day. So falling is a relative term, but 5th in the class is still 5th in the class. D. Wood, you watch him play. What do you think of all this?
Greeny, I think all of this is crazy. I mean, you're talking about, we're talking about like the San Francisco 49ers trading up to number 3. If you trade up to number 3, you're going up to get a guy who you feel has elite traits, things that you can't teach, on top of all the other skills that comes with it takes to, to be a quarterback in the National Football League. And for everyone, it's just madness to me how everyone's talking about Justin Fields slipping all the way down to 5. What are people watching? I've watched Justin Fields over the last 2 years dominate the Big Ten, one of the best conferences that we have in college football. He can do it all. On top of the physical traits that I touched on, 6'3", 230, runs a 4.4. You mean to tell me that in the Kyle Shanahan offense, one of the best, if not the best offensive mind, he couldn't take that young man and make him into an MVP type of quarterback? It just blows my mind.
Matt, you've been around the draft process a long time, and one of the things that I find most interesting is the season ends, the games themselves end, and there is one perception. And then we go into the process, and things tend to get reshuffled. And maybe a good description of the entire process would be overthinking. Is it possible that people go into this thing and they just overthink it, and instead of believing what they see on the film, they all of a sudden start going to a bunch of other data that doesn't necessarily add up to anything? Are we overthinking it, or is the league overthinking it on Justin Fields?
Oh, I definitely think so. I call it prospect fatigue, where you've over-evaluated a player, where we've been watching Justin Fields since he was a sophomore in high school. We know who he is. We know how good he is. So I do think that happens, Greeny. It happened last year to Justin Herbert, who was the 3rd quarterback drafted. I think it happens this year to Justin Fields as well, where he is probably going to be the 4th or 5th quarterback drafted, and in 3 years we're going to be like, hey, how'd that guy fall down the board? The NFL's not good at this. And we're going to have these great clips to go back to and say, hey, remember when we said he should be drafted a lot higher?
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.